My name is Irene Willett, and I'm 32 years old. 5 years ago, my sister told my parents that I had dropped out of medical school. She lied, and that single lie cost me my entire family. They cut me off. They blocked my number. They skipped my residency graduation. They weren't at my wedding. For 5 years, I was no one's daughter. Then last month, my sister was rushed into the emergency room, bleeding, unconscious, and dying. The trauma team paged the chief surgeon. The doors opened, and when my mother saw the name on the white coat walking toward her daughter's stretcher, she grabbed my father's arms so hard that her fingers left bruises. Before we get into this, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story truly resonates with you. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know where you're watching from right now. Now, let me take you back to the fall of 2019, to a kitchen table in Hartford, Connecticut, and the last time my father ever looked at me with pride. Growing up, there were 2 daughters in the Willett house, but only one who seemed to matter. My sister Monica was 3 years older than me, and she had come out of the womb performing school plays, student council, and the kind of effortless charm that allowed her to walk into any room, talk to any adult, and make everyone laugh. My parents, Jerry and Diane Willett, were hard-working middle-class people from Hartford, Connecticut. Dad managed a manufacturing plant, and Mom worked part-time as a bookkeeper. They valued 2 things above all else: appearances and obedience. Monica delivered both flawlessly every single day. I was the quiet one, the girl with her nose buried in a biology textbook while Monica held court at the Thanksgiving table. I wasn't rebellious. I wasn't difficult. I was simply invisible. And there's a difference between being forgotten and never being seen in the first place. Here's a small example. In 8th grade, I qualified for the state science fair, the only student from our school to do so. That same weekend, Monica had a community theater performance. Take one guess where my parents went. When I came home with a second-place ribbon, Dad glanced at it and said, "That's nice, Irene." He didn't ask what my project was about. He never did. I told myself it didn't hurt. I told myself I didn't need the attention. So I poured everything into my grades, my AP classes, and my college applications. I figured that if I couldn't be the daughter they noticed, I would become the daughter they couldn't ignore. And for one brief shining moment I was. The day I was accepted into Oregon Health and Science University's medical program, 3,000 miles from Hartford, something shifted. For the first time in my life, my father looked at me, really looked at me, and said 5 words I had waited 18 years to hear. But I'll get to that. First, you need to understand what Monica did when she realized the spotlight was moving. The acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday in April. I remember because Monica was visiting for the weekend. She was 22 and working as a marketing coordinator at a mid-level firm in Stamford. It was a fine job and a fine life. Fine was Monica's ceiling, though she would never have admitted it. Dad read the letter at the kitchen table. His eyebrows rose. "Oregon Health and Science," he said slowly, as if tasting the words. "That's a real medical school." Then he looked at me. "Maybe you'll make something of yourself after all, Irene." It wasn't really a compliment, but it was the closest thing I had ever received from him, and I held on to it like oxygen. Mom called Aunt Ruth that night. She called her sister. She called 2 neighbors. Irene got into medical school. Can you believe it? Her voice had a pitch I had never heard before. Pride. Genuine, undiluted pride directed at me. At dinner, I glanced across the table at Monica. She was smiling, but it was the kind of smile that stopped at her mouth. Her eyes were doing something else entirely. Calculating, measuring, recalibrating. I know that now. At the time, I simply thought she was tired from the drive. That week, Monica started calling me more, 2 or 3 times a week. "How's the packing going? Who's your roommate? What's Portland like?" She asked about my schedule, my classmates, and my professors. She remembered every name I mentioned. I thought my sister was finally seeing me. I thought maybe getting into medical school had unlocked something between us. Respect, connection, whatever it was that normal sisters were supposed to have. I was wrong. I was feeding her ammunition. Every detail, every name, every vulnerability. I handed it all over with a grateful smile. Then came my 3rd year of medical school. That was when everything finally cracked open. My roommate and best friend was a woman named Sarah Mitchell. She had grown up in foster care and had no family to speak of. She was also the single reason I survived my first year. During one brutal anatomy exam week, I called home, exhausted and desperate for the sound of a familiar voice. Mom answered, but before I could say more than hello, she sighed. "Can't talk, Irene. Monica's having a rough day at work." Then she hung up. Sarah found me sitting on our apartment floor, staring at my phone. She sat down beside me, looked at my face and said, "Their loss. Now get up. We have cadavers to memorize," Sarah said. "Hundreds of them." Sarah was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer in August of my 3rd year. She had no family, no support system, just me. The next morning, I went to the dean's office and explained the situation. He approved a formal 1-semester leave of absence under caregiver status. The paperwork was filed, my spot was held, and I was told I could return in January. Everything was documented. Everything was legitimate. I moved into the spare bedroom at Sarah's apartment, drove her to chemotherapy, and held her hand in the oncology ward at 3 in the morning when the pain became so severe she could barely breathe. I called Monica to tell her. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me still believed she was the sister she had spent years pretending to be. I told her about Sarah, about the leave of absence, and about my plan to return to medical school in the spring. Monica's voice turned syrupy. "Oh my God, Irene, I'm so sorry. Take all the time you need. I won't say a word to Mom and Dad. I know they'd just worry." 3 days later, she called our parents. I don't know the exact words she used that night. I wouldn't learn the full scope of her lie until 5 years later, when everything finally unraveled in the one place none of us expected. But the damage was instant. The call came at 11 that night. I was sitting in a plastic chair beside Sarah's hospital bed. She had suffered a severe reaction to her latest round of chemotherapy and had been admitted overnight. My phone lit up. Your sister told us everything." His voice was flat. "Arctic. The dropping out. The boyfriend. All of it. Dad, that's not." Monica showed us the messages. She showed us proof. I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. "What messages? What proof?" "Dad, I'm sitting in a hospital right now. I'm taking care of my friend." "Monica said you'd say exactly that." There was a pause. Then my mother got on the line. Her voice was shaking. "How could you lie to us for a whole year, Irene? Mom, please listen to me. I filed a leave of absence. I can show you the paperwork. I can give you the dean's number." "Enough," Dad said. "Don't call this house until you're ready to tell the truth. You've embarrassed this family enough." Then the line went dead. I sat on that hospital floor for 20 minutes. Sarah's 4 beeped on the other side of the curtain while my phone screen still showed the call duration. 4 minutes and 12 seconds. That was how long it took my parents to erase me. 20 minutes later, a text from Monica appeared. "I'm sorry, Irene. I had to tell them. I couldn't keep your secret anymore." She wasn't sorry. She had just executed the most precise strike of her life, and signed it with a broken heart emoji. I was 3,000 miles from Hartford. I had $46 in my checking account, and I had just become no one's daughter. But I tried. I need you to know that. I tried everything I could from 3,000 miles away, with no money and a dying friend in the next room. Over the next 5 days, I called my parents 14 times. The first 3 calls went to voicemail. By the 4th, Dad's number was blocked. Mom blocked me 2 days later. I sent 2 emails, one short and one long. The long one included my official leave of absence paperwork as a PDF, the dean's direct phone number, and Sarah's oncologist's name. I gave them every piece of evidence a reasonable person could need. Neither email received a response. Then I wrote a handwritten letter and mailed it priority from Portland. 5 days later it came back. Returned to sender. Unopened. I recognized my mother's handwriting on the envelope. I called Aunt Ruth, Dad's younger sister and the only person in our family who had ever treated me like I mattered equally. Ruth called Dad that same evening. 40 minutes later she called me back, her voice heavy. "He told me to stay out of it, sweetheart. He said, 'You've made your bed.'" Ruth tried to tell him about my leave of absence, but Dad hung up on her. 5 days, 14 calls, 2 emails, 1 letter, 1 intermediary. Every single attempt rejected, blocked, or returned. And here's what finally broke me. This wasn't new. It was the pattern of my entire life compressed into its most brutal form. Every science fair they skipped. Every recital they forgot. Every achievement they dismissed. Every time I had reached for them and discovered that they had already turned away. Every time Monica's version of events was accepted without question while mine was dismissed. This was simply the final and loudest version of a pattern that had existed my entire life. On the 6th day I stopped calling. Not because I had given up, but because I finally realized they had chosen this a long time ago. Monica had simply given them permission to stop pretending. Sarah died on a Sunday morning in December. Quietly. There was only the flat beep of the monitor and the pale winter light spilling through the hospice window. I was the only one in the room. No one from my family called. No one even knew. And the one person I had told, Monica, was too busy tending to the lie she had planted to care that the reason for my leave of absence had just stopped breathing. I organized a small funeral. 6 people came. Sarah's former foster sister drove up from Eugene. A couple of my classmates came. So did a nurse from the oncology ward who had grown incredibly fond of her. I stood at the front of a chapel that could hold 60 people and read a eulogy to rows of empty pews. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't broken, but because I had been crying for 3 months straight, and there was nothing left. That night, I sat alone in Sarah's apartment, our apartment. Her coffee mug was still on the counter. Her jacket still hung by the door. I opened my laptop and stared at the application to re-enroll for the spring semester. Then I found something tucked inside Sarah's copy of Grey's Anatomy, our running joke. She had bookmarked the chapter on the pancreas with a yellow sticky note. It said, "Rude organ. What a jerk." Beneath it, in her shaky but deliberate handwriting, she had written, "Finish what you started, Irene. Become the doctor I know you are, and don't you dare let anyone, especially your own blood, tell you who you are." She had written it weeks before she died. She knew she might not be there when I needed that final push. I closed the laptop, then opened it again. I filled out the re-enrollment form. There were 2 options, crumble or climb. I chose to climb. Not for my parents, not for revenge, but for Sarah and for the version of myself she had always believed in. I went back in January. I had no family support and no safety net. I took out additional student loans, accepted a part-time research assistant position, and ate hospital cafeteria leftovers more times than I will ever admit. Medical school doesn't care about your personal life. Anatomy exams don't pause because your family disowned you. 12-hour clinical rotations don't get shorter because you cried in a supply closet at 2 in the morning. So I stopped crying and started working. I worked like my life depended on it because, in a way, it did. I graduated on time. No one from Hartford came. I matched into a surgical residency at Mercy Rest Medical Center back on the East Coast, a level 1 trauma center and one of the busiest hospitals in Connecticut. That was where I met Dr. Margaret Thornton. Maggie, 58 years old, chief of surgery emerita, built like a steel cable wrapped in a lab coat. She became the mentor I desperately needed and the mother figure I had lost. During my 3rd year of residency, I met Nathan Caldwell. He was a civil rights attorney doing pro bono work at a community clinic near the hospital. He had calm eyes and a dry sense of humor. He was the first person I ever told the full story to who didn't flinch, pity me, or try to fix me. He simply listened. Then he said, "You deserve better." 4 words. Somehow they were enough. We got married on a Saturday afternoon in Maggie's backyard with 30 guests. Nathan's father walked me down the aisle. I had sent an invitation to Hartford. It came back the same way my letter had. Unopened. Aunt Ruth was there though. She cried enough for 2 parents. After the ceremony, Maggie handed me a sealed envelope. "A nomination," she said. "Don't open it yet. You're not ready." I tucked it into my desk drawer without asking questions. 5 years passed. I became someone they would no longer recognize. Now I need to pause here for a second. If you've ever been in a situation where your family refused to hear your side, where the truth didn't matter because someone else's lie was louder, drop a fire in the comments. And if you think my parents are going to regret what they did, type karma. Keep listening because what happened next shocked even me. It was January of the present day. I was 32 years old and the chief of trauma surgery at Mercy Rest Medical Center. I had a house in the suburbs with a porch that caught the morning light, a husband who made me laugh every day, and a golden retriever named Hippocrates, Hippo for short, who had never once judged me for eating cereal at midnight. It was a good life. Real one. A life I had built brick by brick with my own hands. But there is a specific kind of ache that never completely fades. It lives in the hollow space between your ribs, right where a family is supposed to be. I didn't wake up crying anymore. I didn't check my phone hoping for a Hartford area code. But every Thanksgiving there was always a moment, a brief flash, when I set the table, counted the plates, and felt the absence like a phantom limb. Aunt Ruth still called every Sunday. She was my thread back to that world. I never asked about my parents, but I always listened when she volunteered information. Mom and Dad were healthy. Monica got divorced 2 years ago. She was selling medical devices now, and the irony was not lost on me. Last week, Aunt Ruth called with something different in her voice. Cautious, almost frightened. "Irene, there's something I need to tell you about Monica. Something concerning." Before she could finish, my hospital pager went off. Trauma activation. I told Ruth I'd call her back, but I never got the chance, because what she was trying to warn me about was already on its way. Hurtling down a 91 at 60 miles per hour in a sedan that was about to run a red light. Within the hour, the thing Ruth had been warning me about would be lying on my operating table, bleeding out, with my parents sitting in the waiting room and my name on the chart. I just didn't know it yet. Let me back up, because what Monica did wasn't a single lie. It was a campaign. Ruth had been feeding me pieces over the years, reluctantly and carefully, like she was diffusing a bomb one wire at a time. And the picture she painted was worse than I had imagined. For 5 years, Monica maintained the narrative. At every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every family gathering, she performed the role of the grieving older sister. "We don't really talk about Irene," she would tell our cousins. "It's too painful for Mom and Dad." She would shake her head, lower her voice, and let the silence do the work. But she didn't stop at silence. She added details. She told our grandmother that I was homeless. She told Uncle Pete's wife that she had heard from mutual friends that I was in and out of rehab. She told our mother on Christmas Eve 2 years ago that she had tried to reach out to me but I had refused, that I was the one who cut them off. She had flipped the entire story. "At Thanksgiving," Ruth told me once, her voice tight with fury, Monica told me, "I've begged Irene to come home. She won't even answer my calls. I think she hates us." Meanwhile, I was 3 floors deep in an operating room, saving a teenager's life. The genius of it, and I use that word with disgust, was that Monica didn't need my parents to forget me. She needed them to believe I had abandoned them. That way their grief became proof. Their silence became justified. And Monica remained exactly what she had always been. The loyal daughter, the only one who stayed. She wasn't protecting them. She was protecting her position. And there was one more thing Ruth told me. Something I didn't learn until much later that made the whole picture even darker. But I'll get to that. Nathan told me about it over coffee one morning 6 months ago. He had been sitting on the information for 2 years. "There's something I didn't tell you," he said, setting his mug down carefully, the way he does when he's about to deliver bad news in his lawyer voice. 2 years ago, I got a call from HR at your old hospital. Someone using a fake name had contacted them asking about the employment status of Irene Willett. They wanted to know if you had ever been disciplined or if your credentials were legitimate. I stared at him. "Who?" I had a colleague trace the inquiry. The IP address came back to Hartford. The kitchen went very quiet. Hippo's tail thumped against the floor. The coffee maker hissed in the background. She was trying to find something, I said. Nathan nodded. Anything. Anything she could use to keep the story alive, to prove you were a fraud. She didn't find anything. No, he said. Because there was nothing to find. I wrapped my hands tightly around my mug, feeling the heat bleed through the ceramic. She didn't just lie about me once, Nathan. She's been hunting me. He reached across the table and put his hand over mine. That's not sibling rivalry, Irene. That's something else entirely. He was right. Monica hadn't told one lie and moved on. She had built an entire architecture of deception, load-bearing walls, reinforced beams, and spent 5 years making sure none of them cracked. Every holiday story, every whispered rumor, every fake inquiry was another brick. I could have done something then. I could have called a lawyer, confronted my parents, and blown the whole thing open. But I didn't, because life was about to do it for me in the most brutal, public, and ironic way imaginable. It started with a pager at 3 a.m. on a Thursday night in January. 3:07 a.m. The pager dragged me out of a dead sleep. Nathan shifted beside me and murmured something. Hippo lifted his head from the foot of the bed. The screen glowed in the darkness. Level 1 trauma. VC, single female, 35. Blunt abdominal trauma. Hemodynamically unstable. 8 minutes. I was dressed in 4 minutes and driving in 6. The roads were empty and wet. That particular shade of black January gives Connecticut. I ran through the case in my head the way I always did. I ran through the mechanism of injury in my head. Probable organ involvement, surgical options, motor vehicle collision, blunt abdominal trauma, unstable vitals, likely splenic rupture, possible liver laceration. I had performed this surgery 100 times. I badged in through the ambulance bay entrance and walked straight to the trauma bay, where my team was already assembling. 2 residents, a trauma nurse, and anesthesia on standby. I picked up the intake iPad from the charge nurse's station and swiped to the incoming patient chart. Patient, Monica Woolette. DOB, March 14, 1990. Emergency contact. Gerald Woolette, father. I stopped walking. The hallway noise, the beeping monitors, the intercom announcements, the squeak of shoes on linoleum, seemed to pull away like a tide. For 2 seconds, maybe 3, I wasn't a surgeon. I was a 26-year-old woman sitting on a hospital floor in Portland. Her phone still warm in her hand, listening to a dead dial tone. Dr. Woolette. My charge nurse, Linda, appeared at my shoulder. You okay? I looked up, blinked, and set the iPad down. I'm fine. Prep Bay 2 and page Dr. Patel. I want him on standby. The ambulance siren wailed in the distance, getting closer. And behind that ambulance I knew, before I could even see them, that 2 people I hadn't faced in 5 years were coming with it. The ambulance doors burst open, and the stretcher came rushing in. Monica was strapped down, unconscious, an oxygen mask fogging with shallow breaths, blood staining her shirt, one hand hanging limp over the side rail. The paramedics rattled off the numbers. Blood pressure dropping, heart rate climbing, 2 large-bore IVs running wide open. And behind them came my parents, running. My mother looked like she had aged a decade. Her hair was thinner, her face drawn, and she was wearing a bathrobe with slippers on the wrong feet. My father had thrown on flannel and jeans in a panic, and his face was the color of old paper. "That's my daughter," he shouted past the triage nurse. "Where are they taking her? I need to talk to the doctor in charge." The nurse, a woman named Carla whom I had worked with for 3 years, raised both hands. "Sir, family needs to wait in the surgical waiting area. The trauma team is already here. The chief is handling this personally." "Chief." Dad grabbed Carla's arm. "Get me the chief now." Carla glanced through the glass partition toward the trauma bay. She looked at me, gowned, gloved, my badge hanging from my scrub top, and then read the name. Her eyes widened for the briefest fraction of a second. I gave her the smallest shake of my head. Not now. Carla immediately composed herself. Sir, the chief is preparing for surgery. You'll be updated as soon as possible. Please, the waiting room is this way. My parents were led down the hall. Mom whispered prayers, her hands clasped so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. Dad kept looking back through every window he passed. She's all we have, he said to no one in particular. Please. She's all we have. I heard it through the partition glass. Every word. She's all we have. As if I had never existed. I stepped into the scrub room alone. I gave myself 30 seconds. That was all. I turned on the faucet and let the hot water run over my hands. Then I looked at myself in the distorted stainless steel mirror above the sink. Everything looked warped, the way everything felt inside me. There I was. A woman who had been surgically removed from her own family tree, now being asked to surgically save the woman who had held the saw. Part of me wanted to walk out, call Patel, and let someone else carry this. Let my parents owe their daughter's life to a stranger, not to me. That would have been cleaner, simpler. But there was a woman on that table with a ruptured spleen and what appeared to be a grade 3 liver laceration. She was losing blood faster than we could replace it. She was going to die within the next 30 to 40 minutes if the best surgeon in that building didn't operate. And the best surgeon in that building was me. Paged Patel directly. I have a conflict of interest. The patient is a family member. I'm disclosing it now and documenting it in the chart. If at any point my judgment is compromised, you take the lead. No questions asked. Patel's voice was steady. Understood, Chief. I told Linda to note the disclosure in the nursing record. Everything by the book. Everything on paper. Then I pulled on fresh gloves, pushed through the operating room doors, and looked down at the table. My sister's face was bruised. Her oxygen mask fogged and cleared with every shallow breath. She looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner. There were worry lines around her eyes that hadn't been there 5 years ago. For 3 seconds, she wasn't the woman who had destroyed my life. She was simply a body on my table. And that was exactly how I needed her to be. Let's go. Scalpel. 3 hours and 40 minutes. That was how long it took to rebuild what the steering column and a red light had torn apart. Her spleen was ruptured, so we removed it. She had a grade 3 liver laceration, which we repaired with precision sutures, layer by painstaking layer. Internal bleeding from 2 separate mesenteric vessels was clamped, cauterized, and controlled. I spoke only when I needed to. Suction. Clamp. A pad. Retract. My hands moved the way they had been trained to move. Steady, deliberate, fast when speed mattered, and slow when precision mattered more. The residents watched. They always watched during my cases, and I could feel their attention sharpen when the liver repair became difficult. I didn't falter. I couldn't afford to. At 6:48 a.m., I placed the final closing stitch. Monica's vitals were stable. Her blood pressure had normalized. Her urine output was clear. She was alive. Dr. Patel, who had been standing silently in the corner for the entire procedure, pulled down his mask. Irene, he said quietly. That was flawless. Do you want me to talk to the family? I peeled off my gloves, dropped them into the bin, and washed my hands automatically, methodically, the same way I had done it 10,000 times before. No, I said. This one's mine. I caught my reflection again in the scrub room mirror. Same face, same badge. But something had shifted. For 5 years, I had been the daughter who disappeared. Now I was the surgeon who had just pulled her sister back from the edge of death. Those two facts were about to collide in a waiting room 40 feet away, in front of my entire night shift team. I straightened my scrub top, checked my badge, took one breath and walked toward the waiting room. The hallway had never felt so long. The waiting room had that fluorescent hush hospitals get at 7 in the morning. 2 other families were scattered in the far corners. A television murmured weather reports to no one, and in the center row, sitting rigid, sleepless and terrified, were my parents. I pushed through the double doors, still wearing my surgical scrubs, my mask pulled down around my neck, my scrub cap removed, my hair pulled back, and my badge hanging at chest level, printed in clean block letters that anyone could read from 6 feet away. Dr. Irene Willett is Chief of Trauma Surgery. Dad stood first. He always stood first. It was a reflex that need to be in charge. Doctor, how is she? Is Monica? He stopped. His eyes dropped to my badge, rose to my face, then dropped to the badge again. I watched recognition move through him like something physical, a tremor that started in his hands and climbed to his jaw. Mom looked up half a second later. Her lips parted but no sound came out. Her right hand shot to Dad's forearm and clamped down. Her fingers digging into the flannel sleeve with such force that I would later learn she had left 4 bruises shaped like fingertips. 5 seconds of silence. 5 seconds that held 5 years. I spoke first, calm and clinical, using the same voice I used with every family in that room. Mr. and Mrs. Willett, I'm Dr. Willett, Chief of Trauma Surgery. Your daughter, Monica, sustained a ruptured spleen and a grade 3 liver laceration in the accident. The surgery was successful. She's stable and currently in the ICU. You'll be able to see her in approximately 1 hour. Mr. and Mrs. Not Mom and Dad. I watched the words land. I watched them cut. Behind me, through the glass partition, Linda and 2 nurses were watching. From the look on their faces, they had already put it together. My mother moved first. She took a step toward me, her arms lifting, a sob already breaking through her chest. Irene. Oh my God. Oh my God, Irene. I stepped back. Half a step. Light. Unmistakable. She froze. Her hands hung in the air between us, then slowly, painfully, dropped to her sides. Dad's voice came out like gravel dragged over concrete. You're a doctor. I am. You're the chief. I am. But Monica said. He stopped. He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. I could see the machinery of his mind trying to reassemble 5 years of certainty as it crumbled in real time. Mom was crying now, not quietly. We thought you dropped out. We thought she told us you were. Mom's voice broke. She told you I dropped out, I said. My voice remained level. No shaking. No tears. I had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. In the shower, in the car, in the dark before sleep. I had never imagined it would happen in surgical scrubs beneath fluorescent lights. She told you I had a boyfriend with a drug problem. That I was homeless. That I refused to contact you. I looked at them both. None of it was true. Not a single word. Through the glass behind me, I saw Carla press a hand to her mouth. Dr. Kimura, a second-year resident, looked away, his jaw tight. Linda lowered her clipboard and stared. Dad tried to redirect an old instinct. This isn't the time or place, Irene. Your sister is in the ICU. I know, I said. I just spent 3 hours and 40 minutes making sure she survived. So yes, Dad, I'm aware of where she is. He had nothing to say. For the first time in my life, my father, a man who had never been at a loss for a command, was completely speechless. The silence was doing the work I never could. 5 years of blocked calls, returned letters, and ignored emails had never made a dent. But standing there alive, accomplished, and wearing the proof of everything I had become across my chest was louder than anything I could have written in a letter. Mom reached for the back of a chair to steady herself. The letters, she whispered. You said you sent letters. 2 emails with my leave of absence paperwork attached. 1 handwritten letter mailed priority. You sent it back unopened. I recognized your handwriting on the envelope. She pressed her fist against her mouth. Dad stared at the floor. I called 14 times in 5 days. I asked Aunt Ruth to talk to you. I wasn't accusing them. I was reciting facts. And facts don't need volume. You told her to stay out of it. Then Linda appeared at the door. She didn't know the full story, not yet, but she had hospital business. Dr. Willett, I'm sorry to interrupt. The board chair saw the overnight trauma log and asked me to pass along his congratulations. The Physician of the Year selection committee has nominated you for tonight's recognition. Linda said it the way she would say anything routine. She had no idea she had just detonated a second bomb. Mom looked at me, her eyes swollen, her mascara gone, her bathrobe still on. Physician of the Year. It's an internal recognition, I said. It's nothing. I turned to Linda. Thank you. I need to check postoperative vitals. Excuse me. I walked toward the ICU corridor with measured steps, my spine straight. I didn't look back, but I heard my mother's voice behind me, small and ruined. Jerry, what have we done? And then I heard something I had never heard before. My father said nothing. Because, for the first time, silence was the only honest thing he had left. 4 hours later, I entered ICU room 6 for Monica's standard postoperative assessment. The monitor beeped in a steady rhythm as morning light angled through the blinds. Vitals. Drainage output. Wound check. Routine. Except nothing about this was routine. Monica's eyes were open, glassy and unfocused from the anesthesia, but open. She blinked at the ceiling, blinked at the 4-pole, and then her gaze shifted toward me. She squinted. She read my badge. Then she read it again. The color drained from her face in a way I had seen before, but only in patients who had just been told their prognosis was bad. Irene, she rasped. Good morning, Monica. I'm your attending surgeon. You sustained a ruptured spleen and a grade 3 liver laceration in the accident. The surgery went well. You're going to make a full recovery. You're a doctor, she said. It wasn't a question. It was a reckoning. I'm the chief of this department. I have been for 2 years. I watched her move through the same spectrum Dad had gone through, only more slowly because Monica was processing it through a morphine drip and what I suspected was dawning terror. Confusion first, then disbelief, then fear. And then it appeared. The expression I had seen my entire life. That quick flicker behind her eyes. Calculation. Even now, lying in a hospital bed with my sutures holding her liver together, Monica was trying to figure out how to spin this. Irene, listen. I can explain. You don't need to explain anything to me. I nodded toward the glass door, where 2 figures stood in the hallway watching us, their faces wrecked and their eyes red. You need to explain it to them. I updated her chart, checked the drain, and left without another word. I didn't stay to hear what happened next, but the entire ICU floor heard it. Monica's room wasn't soundproof, and neither was the truth. Okay, I have to stop here for a second. What do you think Monica told my parents when they walked into that ICU room? Option A. She finally tells the truth. Option B. She doubles down on the lie. Option C. She plays the victim again. Drop your answer in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time because the next part of the story is where everything comes crashing down. I learned what happened from Linda, who heard it from the ICU nurse, who had heard it through the glass. If you guessed option C, congratulations. You know my sister. The moment my parents walked into that ICU room, Monica started crying. Big, heaving sobs that pulled at her stitches and sent the heart monitor climbing. Mom, you have to believe me. I never meant for it to go this far. I was scared for her. Dad stood at the foot of the bed. His voice barely controlled. Monica, Irene is a surgeon. She's the chief of trauma surgery at this hospital. She said she sent letters and emails. She called 14 times. She asked Ruth to intervene. Mom's voice was flat and hollow. Is that true? She's exaggerating, Monica said. You know how she, Ruth tried to tell us. Dad cut her off, and this time his voice cracked, not from sadness, but from the structural failure of everything he had believed for 5 years. 2 years ago, Ruth called and said Irene was in residency. Surgeon, you told us Ruth was lying. You said she was just trying to cause drama. So what is the full story, Monica? Mom! Monica screamed from the ICU bed. The nurse at the station outside flinched. 2 rooms down, a patient's visitor looked up from their phone. And Monica, backed into a corner with IVs in both arms and my sutures holding her abdomen together, did what she had always done. She pivoted from defense to offense. Fine. She's a doctor. Good for her. But she abandoned this family. She never called because we blocked her number, Monica, Dad said. His hand was gripping the bed rail, his knuckles white. Because you told us to. The heart monitor beeped. The 4 dripped. And Monica, perhaps for the first time in her adult life, had no script left. Aunt Ruth walked into the ICU at 9:45 that morning. I had called her from the scrub room after surgery, not to summon her as a weapon, but because Monica was her niece too, and Ruth deserved to know what had happened. But Ruth came prepared. 5 years of silence will do that to a woman with a filing system and a long memory. She didn't sit down. She didn't hug anyone. She stood in the middle of the room and said, "I've been waiting 5 years to have this conversation, and I'm not waiting one more minute." Then she pulled out her phone and opened a folder she had labeled Irene Proof. I found out later that it contained screenshots of every email I had sent my parents during those first desperate days, the PDF of my leave of absence from Oregon Health and Science University, signed by the dean and stamped with the registrar's seal, my re-enrollment confirmation, and a photo from my residency graduation. Me in a cap, holding my diploma with Aunt Ruth beside me, the only family member in the frame. She held out the phone. Mom took it with trembling hands. "And here," Ruth said, swiping to a text thread. "This is from Monica, sent to me 4 years ago." She read it aloud. "Don't tell Mom and Dad about Irene's residency. It'll just confuse them. They're finally at peace." The room went still. Monica stared at the ceiling. Her jaw was set, but the calculation had vanished from her eyes. What replaced it was something I had never seen there before. The look of someone who had run out of rooms to hide in. "You told me to keep quiet for the family's sake," Ruth said, looking straight at Monica. "But this family hasn't had peace. It's had a 5-year blackout." Then Ruth turned to my parents. "And you too, you let this happen not because you didn't love Irene, but because loving Monica was easier." Nobody argued. There was nothing left to argue with. Mom sank into the chair beside Monica's bed, but she wasn't looking at Monica anymore. She was scrolling through Ruth's phone, reading my emails one by one. Her lips moved silently as she read. Then she stopped on the last one, the email I had sent the night before my residency graduation. I knew what it said. I had reread it 100 times in my own safe folder. "Mom, I don't know if you'll read this. I graduated from residency today. I wish you were here. I'm still your daughter. I never stopped being your daughter." Mom doubled over in the chair. She wasn't crying. It was beyond crying. It was the sound of someone finally meeting the full weight of a mistake they could never undo. Dad stood at the window with his back to the room, his shoulders shaking. Aunt Ruth told me later that it was the first time she had ever seen her older brother cry in 62 years. Not once. Not at their mother's funeral. Not when his business nearly went under. Never. But he cried now, silently, facing the parking lot while the monitor beeped behind him. Monica lay in the bed, and she had stopped talking. The 4 dripped. Her eyes were fixed on a point on the ceiling. There was nothing left to perform. No audience that would believe her. The persona she had worn for 35 years was lying in pieces on the linoleum, and no amount of charm, tears, or clever reframing could put it back together. "You missed her wedding, Jerry," Ruth said quietly, her voice exhausted. "Nathan's father walked her down the aisle. Do you understand what that means?" Dad didn't turn from the window. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and cracked down the center. "What have we done?" It wasn't a question. He wasn't asking. He was convicting himself. And knowing the truth and knowing what to do with it are two very different things. I came back that afternoon at the end of my shift, 22 hours after the pager had woken me. But who was counting? My parents were still there. Course they were. Where else would they go? Back to the house where they had spent 5 years pretending they only had one daughter. Mom stood the second I walked in. Her face was swollen, her eyes nearly shut from crying. "Irene, baby, I'm so sorry. I'm so..." I held up my hand gently but firmly. "I hear you and I believe you're sorry. But sorry is a word. It's a starting place, not a finish line. What I need is time." Dad turned from the window. He looked like he had aged 5 years since that morning. We want to make this right. Then you need to understand something. My voice remained even. This wasn't anger. This was clarity, the kind that only comes after you've burned through every other emotion and what remains is the truth, clean and simple. I'm not the girl you sent away. I'm not the girl who begged you to listen for 5 days from 3,000 miles away. I'm someone who built a life, a whole life without you. And if you want to be part of it now, it will be on my terms. Not Monica's. Not yours. Mine. Dad opened his mouth, an old reflex, then closed it and nodded. A small, devastated nod. I looked at Monica in the bed. Her eyes were open, watching me. When you're recovered, I said, you and I are going to have a conversation. Real one. But not today. Today you're my patient. I don't mix the two. Then I left. Spine straight. Steps measured. I didn't turn around. I wasn't closing the door, but I was the one who decided when it opened, how wide it opened, and who was allowed to walk through it. 2 weeks later, Monica was discharged. Her incision was healing. The rest of her, not so much. I chose the location for our conversation. A coffee shop in Middletown, halfway between her apartment and my house. Neutral ground. Nathan came with me but sat at a separate table near the window, pretending to read legal briefs. He wasn't pretending. Monica walked in looking like someone who had been hollowed out. She had lost weight. Surgery plus not eating will do that, and the confidence she usually wore like cologne was gone. For the first time in my memory, my older sister looked exactly her age. She sat down, wrapped her hands around a cup she never drank from, and stared at the table. I didn't bother with a preamble. I'm not going to yell at you. I'm not going to list every lie. You know what you did. What I want to know is why. The silence lasted long enough for the barista to call someone's name, the sound echoing off the walls. Then Monica finally spoke. Because you were going to be everything I wasn't, and I couldn't handle it. I let that sit between us. That's honest, I said. The first honest thing you've said to me in 10 years. Her eyes dropped. I'm sorry, Irene. I know you are. But sorry doesn't give me back the years. Sorry doesn't put Dad at my wedding. Sorry doesn't undo the box Mom shipped back to me, the one containing my high school graduation things, returned as if I were dead to her. Monica looked away. Her eyes filled with tears. Real tears. I know the difference now. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. I also called your medical school twice. I tried to get them to revoke your leave of absence. I told them you'd fabricated the caregiver documents. The coffee shop hummed around us as I stared at her. Your dean wouldn't listen to me, she continued. He protected you. He didn't protect me, Monica. He believed the truth. That's not the same thing. I leaned back in my chair and took a breath. This was the part I'd mapped out the night before, sitting on the kitchen floor with Hippo's head in my lap while Nathan reviewed it with me like a closing argument. I'm not cutting you out of my life, I said. But I'm setting conditions. Monica nodded, small and defeated. You will tell the truth, the full truth, to every family member you lied to. Every aunt, every uncle, every cousin who spent 5 years believing I was in rehab or living on the street. You will correct every single story. I will, she whispered. And you'll do it in writing. An email to the family group. All 47 people. Ruth will confirm everyone receives it. Monica nodded again. The following week, I met with my parents separately. Nathan drove me, and we sat at their kitchen table. The same table where Dad had read my medical school acceptance letter all those years ago. The same table where Monica had smiled with only her mouth. I'm open to rebuilding, I told them. But I need you both to go to family counseling. Not for me. For yourselves. You need to understand why you believed a lie about your own daughter and never once picked up the phone to check. Dad's jaw tightened. We don't do that in this family. That's exactly why we're here, Dad. Mom gently placed her hand on his arm. Jerry, please. He looked at her, then at me. Something behind his eyes cracked. Not open, not yet, but cracked. Fine. I stood to leave, then turned back. One more thing. Nathan's father walked me down the aisle. That happened. Can't undo it. But if you want to know your future grandchildren, you start now. Not with grand gestures, but with consistency. Apologies expire. Boundaries don't. That's the difference between sentiment and structure. 1 month later, the Physician of the Year Gala was held in the ballroom of the Hartford Marquis Hotel, with 200 people in attendance. Surgeons, department heads, hospital administrators, donors, board members, crystal glasses clinking, name tags hanging from lanyards, and a string quartet playing something classical that nobody was really listening to. I wore a simple black dress. Nathan sat at a front table, looking like he'd been born in a suit. Maggie Thornton sat beside him with her arms crossed and the faintest smile on her face, the one she reserved for moments she'd been quietly engineering for years. The MC stepped to the podium. This year's Physician of the Year is a surgeon whose clinical excellence, composure under pressure, and commitment to her patients have set a new standard for this institution. Dr. Irene Hewlett, Chief of Trauma Surgery. The applause began immediately, followed by a standing ovation from the surgical staff who had seen me work. I walked to the stage beneath the warm spotlight and placed my hands on the podium. Kept my speech short. 5 years ago I almost quit. Not because I couldn't do the work, but because I lost the people I thought I needed in order to keep going. What I learned is that the people you need aren't always the ones you're born to. Sometimes they're the ones who choose you. I looked at Maggie, Nathan, and my team in the third row. Then I looked toward the back of the ballroom. In the last row were 2 seats Ruth had quietly arranged. My parents sat there. Mom in a navy dress she had probably bought that week. Dad wearing a tie he clearly hated. They sat with their hands in their laps, looking up at the stage with expressions I could only describe as grief and pride waging war across the same face. And sometimes, I continued, the ones you're born to find their way back late, but they're here. Mom covered her mouth. Ed stood. The applause filled the ballroom. After the gala, Dad found Nathan near the coat check and stood in front of my husband for a long moment. I owe you an apology. I should have been the one. Nathan, gracious to his core, extended his hand. With all due respect, sir, you should have been a lot of things. But we're here now. They shook hands. Dad's eyes were red, and he didn't let go right away. Monica sent the email on a Wednesday night, and Ruth confirmed that all 47 family members had received it. I didn't read it until the next morning. Nathan brought me coffee, set the laptop on the kitchen table without a word, and then Nathan knows when to give me space. The email was 3 paragraphs long. No excuses, no flowery language. Just the facts laid bare. Monica admitted that she had lied about my leaving medical school, fabricated evidence, maintained the deception for 5 years, and deliberately prevented our parents from learning the truth. She ended with one sentence. Irene never abandoned this family. I made sure they believed she did. That is entirely on me. The responses came in waves. Uncle Pete's wife called Ruth in tears, confessing that she'd repeated Monica's rehab story at a book club 2 years earlier. Cousin David in Vermont sent Monica a one-line reply. I don't know who you are anymore. Then Nana June, our 89-year-old grandmother and the matriarch of the family, called me directly. Monica had told her that asking about me was too painful, so Nana had stopped asking about me at Thanksgiving. I'm 89 years old, she said, her voice paper-thin but furious, and I have never been lied to so thoroughly by my own blood. Irene, forgive an old woman for not seeing it. There's nothing to forgive, Nana. You were lied to. We all were. Nobody organized a boycott against Monica. Nobody sent group texts declaring her dead to them. But the trust she'd stockpiled, the currency she'd been spending for 35 years, was gone. You could feel it in the silence after her email, in the replies that never came, and in the invitations that quietly stopped arriving. No one punished Monica. They simply stopped believing her. And for someone who had built her entire identity around being believed, that was punishment enough. My parents started counseling in February with a therapist in West Hartford named Dr. Rena, a calm, direct woman who didn't let you dodge a question. Mom took to it immediately. She'd been carrying the weight of her passivity like a stone in her coat pocket, and the first time Dr. Rena named it, enabling through silence, Mom broke down in the office and cried for 40 minutes. Ruth told me about it later. I wasn't there. It wasn't my session to witness. Dad struggled. He went, sat in the chair, and answered questions in as few words as possible. According to Ruth, Dr. Rena told him that his need to be right and his refusal to revisit a decision once it had been made had been the load-bearing wall of the entire disaster. Monica had provided the lie, but Dad's pride had cemented it into place. He didn't argue with her. That might have been the first sign of change. 3 weeks into counseling, Mom mailed me a handwritten letter. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "I failed you," she wrote. "Not just when I believed Monica, but every time I chose peace over fairness. Every time I let your father's temper decide what was true. Every time I saw you standing in the doorway, quiet and waiting, and told myself you were fine because it was easier than admitting I wasn't brave enough to fight for you." I read it at the kitchen table while Hippo slept on my feet and Nathan sat in the next room, pretending not to listen. I didn't cry, but I held that letter for a long time. Then I opened the drawer where I keep the things that matter. Sarah's card, my returned letters, the wedding invitation that had come back unopened, and placed Mom's letter inside. Same drawer, different side. Progress isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just rearranging what you carry. Monica started therapy too, separate from the family sessions. I knew because Ruth told me, and because Monica mentioned it awkwardly the second time we met for coffee. We've had 3 of those meetings now. Each one short, each one stiff, each one slightly more honest than the last. The first time, she stared at her hands and said nothing useful. The second time, she told me about therapy. The third time, she said something that actually landed. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I deserve it, but I want you to know I'm trying not to be that person anymore." I took a sip of my coffee, set it down, and looked at her. "Then show me." Words are cheap in this family. They always have been. "Show me with time." She nodded. She didn't push. She didn't perform. That was new. Do I believe her? Honestly, I don't know. I've spent a lifetime reading Monica's performances, and I'm still not sure where the acting ends and her actual self begins. Maybe she's not sure either. Maybe that's what therapy is for. But I believe in the possibility of change. That's all I can offer right now. She carries my surgical scar on her body, a 7-inch mark on her left upper abdomen that will fade from red to white over the coming year. Every time she gets dressed, every time she catches her reflection, she'll see the mark left by the sister she tried to erase. The sister who, when it mattered most, held a scalpel with steady hands and chose her oath over her anger. I carry her damage in my memory. 5 years of silence lodged somewhere between my ribs. We're even, in the strangest and most painful way 2 sisters can be even. And maybe, with enough time, enough real, unglamorous, consistent time, we'll find our way to something that isn't even. Something better. Something new. I'm sitting in my office at Mercy Crest. It's late. The hallway outside is quiet, wrapped in that particular stillness hospitals have after the last visitors leave and before the night shift energy kicks in. My nameplate is on the door. My diplomas are on the wall. Not because I need to see them, but because the residents do. On my desk sits a framed wedding photo. Nathan, Maggie, Aunt Ruth, and 30 guests in a backyard bathed in October light. My parents aren't in that frame. But on the bookshelf beside it is a new photo taken 3 weeks ago. Mom and Dad are standing on my front porch in their coats, looking slightly lost. Dad's hands are in his pockets. Mom is mid-smile, trying too hard, but trying. It's awkward. It's imperfect. It's real. If you're watching this and you see yourself in my story, whether you're the one who was silenced or the one who did the silencing, I want to tell you something. The truth doesn't expire. It doesn't matter whether it takes 5 days or 5 years. The truth has a patient way of showing up exactly when it's needed most. You can't rush it, but you can't outrun it either. I didn't get revenge on my sister. I didn't need revenge. I became someone who didn't need it, and that turned out to be the most devastating response of all. Not a scheme. Not a plan. Just a life lived fully on my own terms. And if you're waiting for your family to see you, really see you, stop waiting. See yourself first. Build the life you deserve with the people who show up. And when the others finally turn around, let them find a door that you control. You decide when it opens. You decide how wide. You decide who walks through. That's not revenge. That's architecture. Sunday morning, the first week of February. Light snow is falling outside the kitchen window, the kind that doesn't stick but makes everything look as if it's being gently forgiven. I'm making French toast. Nathan is grinding coffee beans and singing off-key to something on the radio. Hippo is stationed beneath the table, optimistic about crumbs. Then the doorbell rings. I wipe my hands on a towel and open the front door. Mom and Dad are standing on the porch in their winter coats. Dad is holding a bottle of orange juice like he's not sure what to do with his hands. Mom has a tin of homemade cookies. Her shortbread, the one she used to make for every school event of Monica's and none of mine. "Hi," Mom says, nervous but hopeful. "Come in," I tell them. "Coffee's almost ready." Dad steps inside and looks around the kitchen as if he's cataloging everything. The house he's never been in, the life he almost never knew existed. He clears his throat. "Can I help with anything?" I look at him. My father, 62 years old, standing in my kitchen for the first time and asking permission to be useful. "You can set the table, Dad." He nods, goes to the cabinet I point to, takes out the plates, counts them and looks at me. "4. 4, I confirm." He sets them down one by one, carefully, as if they might break if he isn't gentle. Nathan hands him a cup of coffee. Mom hugs me at the stove. Not a dramatic movie hug, just a quiet one. Her arms go around me, her forehead resting against my shoulder. No words, just holding on. Hippo thumps his tail. Snow falls outside. The French toast sizzles. It's not perfect. It's not the childhood I deserved. And it's not the reconciliation movies promise. But it's real. And real is more than I had for a very long time. My name is Dr. Irene Ulett. I'm 32 years old and I am finally, slowly, carefully, letting myself be someone's daughter again. 4 plates. It's a start. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about your own family, your own boundaries, or someone you've lost and found, leave me a comment and tell me, what would you have done? Would you have opened that door? And if you want more stories like this, check the description for one I think you'll love just as much. Thank you for being here. I'll see you next time.